that. Mm-hmm. And then, sometimes, I noticed it on the UW campus, and then definitely at SNU, there's just people who aren't really as interested. They don't want to make the effort quite as much.
Yeah.
But I think, I definitely miss Korea. I mean, that's why I'm going back. And so it was really a positive experience. Mm-hmm. And even though, there was times that I felt like my Korean didn't get any better, by the end of it, I could see that there was small steps that added up.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Let's go back to before you went to SNU. And so the last thing that you did before that was the second year of Korean?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was in that class with you, so I know a little bit about what it was like. But can you tell me like what you thought about that class and kind of what you did in that class and in terms of learning Korean, or any like friendships or people you met in that class that helped you learn, anything like that?
Okay. Well, I definitely still have friends, because I was also, during that year, I don't know if you ever went to KCG or the Korean Conversation Club.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Yeah, so I was part of that club, and I still have friends from that club. I would say that they were pretty much my main, social circle while I was there. Mm-hmm. So obviously the Korean was a big part of my time at UW. And other people from our class were part of it, like, I don't know, remember Isaiah?
Yeah.
And Gabby.
Yeah.
And then other people who were in first year Korean. Mm-hmm. Let's see, about that class, I mean...
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that class?
Oh, what's that?
What are your thoughts on that class, or how do you think that class helped you or didn't help you to learn Korean?
I think that the best thing that I learned during that class, I mean, there was a lot of memorization. And that's what, I remembered from the intensive summer and in that class, was that she really, if we were coming into class, we needed to know the material. Mm-hmm. And I know that that's important in a lot of language classes, but that's just sort of comparing it to what the language class I had at SNU. Mm-hmm. They weren't, it was pretty lax on what we needed to know. But for Kim Sonsengnim, the vocab sheets that we had, mm-hmm. and, the practice conversations that we had, I felt like it was very structured. Uh-huh. And so even though there was a lot of studying going into it, I felt like, I knew if I studied it, I could succeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that was a helpful aspect, like you really appreciated that aspect of the class, or was it too hard, or you thought it was too much work?
No, I think it was a good aspect. I think that any language course is too much work because it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But at times it was definitely like I was exhausted doing it, but I think it was really important to have that much work to actually be able to learn something. Okay. And something else that I'm thinking of also is Kim Sonsengnim spoke at, I don't know if you remember this, but she spoke very normally, like at a fairly normal speed.
Yeah.
She did not slow down for us. And I think that was hugely helpful because, the other teachers did that. They slowed way down, and I found it more difficult to understand. And I found that when I watch clips and stuff, being able to take in the overall meaning is easier for me. Mm-hmm. And I think that really goes back to that, having those first couple of years studying with Kim Sonsengnim.
Uh-huh. Yes. So that was a positive aspect about the teacher. And was she the teacher for your summer intensive?
Yeah, she was.
Okay.
So it was like the first, 2 years. It wasn't actually 2 years, but 2 years of material.
Right. Okay, that's great. Can you tell me a little bit more about, because I wasn't in the summer intensive with you in the first year. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Was it like the second year class because it was the same teacher, or what was different about it?
Yeah, it was pretty similar. A lot of the in-class stuff was the same. We would come in and we would, write our sentences and, practice them. We would practice conversations with, wherever was sitting next to us. I'm trying to think if there was any really big differences. She did have, and I don't remember, I don't think she did during the second year, but during the intensive, she had a couple of teaching aides who were sort of brand new, and so it definitely gave it a slightly different feeling because they were, I would say, more Korean than she was. And so, but they wouldn't speak as much English. I mean, she didn't speak a lot of English in class, but they would speak even less. They really just taught in Korean, which I also think is really, really helpful. I mean, I think she did explain more in English, though, and I think that maybe I would say it was a little bit more useful in Korea when they didn't speak any English at all. That was like the one thing that was nice in class. They only, when they were explaining something, they explained it in Korean because there was students in that class who were, from other parts of the world who didn't speak English very well. And so if they explained it in English, they wouldn't be able to understand.
Right.
So, and, that could have been the reason why they were moving a little bit more slowly because they wanted to make sure what they were explaining made sense to everyone.
And so what would you do in that kind of situation when they explained it in Korean if you didn't understand it, since they weren't going to say it in English?
Right, and for me, like I said, this was sort of review, so I didn't really have to worry about that too much.
See. Yes.
But if we didn't understand something, they would, as long as we raised our hand and said, I don't understand that, we would say that in Korean, and then they would either try explaining it again in a different way in Korean, or if there was specifically like, we don't understand this word you're trying to use to explain it, they would translate the word for us. They would, go through and translate it into all the languages, which is why, it didn't really, make it so they were explaining it in English. It would just clarify a word that we didn't understand if they couldn't successfully first explain it using Korean.
I see.
So it did make it a more involved process, but I think it also made, once you're understanding what they're explaining in Korean, when they're explaining other topics, it sort of puts it on a different level.
Yeah. Okay. So those were all of the classes you took in Korean. You weren't taking any classes before your first year intensive.
Right, yeah.
Okay. So, now we've gone back in time to your, even before your first year, because you said you knew a little bit about it beforehand. So can I ask you a little bit more about the stuff that you did before you even started taking Korean classes? So you mentioned, you watched TV shows like Running Man, and you had even a Korean friend in middle school. So I guess in middle school and high school, what sorts of things were you doing, and how often were you doing them, and how were they inspiring you to study Korean? How did you even then end up choosing Korean as the language, in college?
Right. Let's see. So pretty much I just once I discovered they were on Netflix, I just started watching them. And so at the beginning, and I don't remember exactly for time-wise how this all happened, but I just started watching them, and I would say I was at least watching an episode a day.
Wow.
So
yeah.
It was a daily thing.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to figure out probably, not that far into it, I started, probably a couple of, TV shows into it. I started being like, I'm starting to understand words. And so once I started to understand words, I would start, looking them up to see what they meant specifically, or, writing down lists of stuff that I recognized. And
is that how you kind of learned Hangul?
Yeah, and that was something that I then that was right before that summer of 2014. I, started I didn't know them super well, I didn't totally memorize them, but I had written out lists. So, if I wanted to decode it, I could, but it wasn't a very natural thing for me yet. But, that was pretty much, and besides that, there wasn't a lot of formal studying. It was all just listening to it.
Yeah. Okay, so you were watching the TV shows at that time. Were you also listening to the music at that time, or did